pumps at numerous filling stations in the province are reported to have run dry due to problems at two major plants. The Fuel Retailers Association has warned that fuel problems in Gauteng have the potential to worsen. Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa says young people need access to information in order to enable them to empower themselves. He was speaking at a Youth Development Expo in Ndwedwe, north of Durban. We would like to send a warm congratulations to South Africa's swimming sensation, Mr. Chad le Clos. He won gold in the men's 100-meter butterfly final at the FINA World Championships in Kazan, Russia. Le Clos touched the wall first in 50.56 seconds for a new African record. Well done to him. Radio News is leading with the following headlines this morning. President Jacob Zuma will release the first report on the status of women in the country's economy in order to measure progress today. And Twitter is abuzz with messages of condolences following the death of a South African man during an attack on a hotel in Mali. Several hundred people have marched through the American city of Ferguson in Missouri on the eve of the first anniversary of the fatal shooting of an unarmed black teenager, Michael Brown, by police. Condolences keep pouring in for Kwaito star Arma Shesha from the popular Durban Kwaito group Big Naz. He died in Durban on Friday. Durban record company Afrotainment's owner DJ Tira broke the news on social media. The deceased brother Sianda Khomo says Arma Shesha, whose real name was Busiso Khomo, died from complications following an operation. A very good morning and warm welcome to the best weekend news analysis program, Media Monitor, with me, Alicia Jali. Now, today is a very significant date in the history of our country. We salute the heroic women of 1956 who marched to the Union buildings against the use of Dompass. Do follow us and share your views on today's discussions on Twitter at SA Media Monitor. Giving us a sense of today's headlines and analysis of the stories that hogged the news headlines throughout the week, we're very pleased to welcome two ladies this morning. Miss Sakina Kamwendo, the host of, she's also a media practitioner, as well as Miss Valerie Bourget. She is a Pretoria News editor. Ladies, a very good morning to both of you. Happy Women's Day. Thank you for joining us.
And to you and everybody in South Africa.
All right, Valerie?
Yes, no, thank you. It's lovely to be here on this special day.
All right. Now, it was a good weekend in sports as Orlando Pirates continued with their good form in the CAF Confederations Cup last night with a 2-0 win against CS Sfaxien. Congratulations to the Buccaneers and, of course, our very own Chad le Clos, who won gold in the men's 100 meters butterfly final at the FINA World Championships in Kazan, Russia. Let's now have a look at what's making front pages this morning. All right, the Sunday Times there is leading with a story about Advocate Thuli Madonsela's shocking PRASA report exposing the parastatals awarding of tenders. The Sunday Independent is leading with a story about how business people and government officials use gadgets to tap and bag cell phones of, wait for it, cabinet ministers. Now, this information is apparently used to blackmail people in powerful positions. The City Press is leading with a story about the National Prosecuting Authority preparing to lay criminal charges against former SARS boss Ivan Pillay, ex-Hawks head Anwar Dramat, as well as top prosecutor Gerinel. The Weekend Argus is a story there, shocking story about the Mali hotel hostage situation and how one South African was killed in the incident. The Sunday Tribune has a story about 3 men who appeared in court after they were found with the super spying devices which can tap into, wait for it, more than 10,000 cell phones and eavesdrop on conversations from as far away as 3 kilometers. And now from papers from outside our borders, the Lesotho Express is a story about LCE fires lectures. Nigeria's Daily Trust is leading with a story about retired Colonel Abdulumni Aminu, Borno State military governor during President Ibrahim Babaginda's regime, narrates, among other things, how he led other officers to pick up current President Muhammadu Buhari from Doden Barracks in Lagos, where he was a military head of state. Not forgetting Zimbabwe's Sunday Mail there, President Mugabe says the wave of job losses triggered by Supreme Court ruling validating termination of contracts via 3 months notices is the result of bad colonial era that are just unfair, unjust and unacceptable. All right, we'll start with the Sunday Times this morning, ladies. Basically, the headline read there, off the rails, Thuli's shock PRASA report. Now, Sunday Times claims that their reporters have seen Madonsela's damning provisional report, which has been labelled missing tracks, which suggests axed Lucky Montana actually milked the parastatal's coffers by catching joy rides on the blue train with female companions, signing off on dodgy tenders without proper protocol. Let's start with you.
I mean, it's not the first time that we've heard these allegations. People have been waiting for the longest time for Advocate Madonsela's report into PRASA, but a lot has happened in the meantime in PRASA. And, you know, you talk about dodgy tenders, one of the fights between Lucky Montana and the board of PRASA now is about a tender and, the fact that a certain official, an executive official, was reinstated when, according to Montana, she had been implicated in wrongdoing in the awarding of some tenders. So it's one of those, where we await, to see what exactly Thuli Madonsela's report says, because she was due to release that report and then it was, placed on hold again because people came forward and said they wanted to make submissions. So, at this point, it's very much everyone trying to save their own bacon, as it were. So for me, I'll sit this one out and wait and see what happens at the end.
Val?
I think it's very interesting as well if you look at it from the angle of Thuli Madonsela. We've seen what happened with Thuli Madonsela's Nkandla report. I'm sure that she's done an excellent job on this report, but the question is, what is the fallout going to be this time? How will her recommendations be received? As you say, there's been a lot of talk about PRASA before this time. I know a report had also been running with a story about trains that perhaps were not ideal for the South African situation. I'm not sure if that's going to come up in the report, but I'm really interested to see how the report is received.
No, absolutely. And it also goes on to detail that story, another, fake qualification that has been unearthed at PRASA. Again, do you pin this on Lucky Montana? In the case of Daniel Mtimkulu, you couldn't, because he found Mtimkulu there. I'm not sure in the latest revelation, how this works, but clearly there are problems in PRASA.
I mean, before looking at how the tenders were actually given out, they should look at how the people were hired within the parastatal.
Absolutely. And, again, it's not as, Aubrey Machikli always says, this is seemingly not a battle of, angels and devils. It's somewhere in between. Everybody is just doing what they need to do to keep their side of the bargain clean, it would seem.
Absolutely.
But the truth always prevails.
It shall prevail indeed. Let's now have a look at page 17 there. It says, SA has a duty to step up as Harare nears the end of an era. Now, a piece about how Pretoria or South Africa should step in and make sure that there's a smooth transition after the end of Mugabe's reign in Zimbabwe in order to avoid what they say is a possible chaotic and even violent leadership change.
Well, I think everybody's interested to see what happens next in Zimbabwe. I think there's a sense of relief, perhaps, that Mugabe's time is coming to an end.
We've been saying that for a long time.
We've been saying it for a long time. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see also what role Grace Mugabe has in the leadership struggle. But I know South Africa has a reluctance to get too involved, but at the same time, if we can provide a leadership role, I think that would be in everybody's interests. What happens to Zimbabwe matters to South Africa.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a bit of a catch-22. We have to respect the sovereignty of, the Zimbabwean state, allow Zimbabweans to make decisions that, work for them as a nation. But at the same time, we can't ignore what happens in Zimbabwe, because we will bear the brunt of whatever, unfortunate decisions are made in that country.
It's like Lesotho, basically.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. just on the flippant side, you know how people say they should be our 10th and 11th and 12th province along with Swaziland kind of thing. But yes, those countries very much dependent on South Africa. And there are, of course, those South Africans who think that, you know, we should leave, you know, these countries alone to sort out their own problems. Can't do, because it is inevitable that we will catch the brunt of the fallout of whatever happens there.
But of course, with so many Zimbabweans living in South Africa now, we have an added interest. You know, I think that we have to acknowledge that the countries are perhaps more closely aligned than many other countries are. But in South Africa's interest, a peaceful transition in Zimbabwe is essential.
All right. So, well, we're still going to have to wait and see what happens if Mugabe's reign does actually come to an end. Let's now have a look at the Sunday Independent. And the front page there reads, panic over super spy gadget. Now, this is a very interesting story. In a shocking revelation by the Independent, 3 men were found in possession of a super spying grabber device which can tap into 10,000 phone lines and eavesdrop on conversations up to 3 kilometers away. Now, this discovery apparently has left South African intelligence and police alike sleepless, as the device is rumored to have been secured with the help of government officials.
Really? It left them sleepless? Maybe it's just the cynic in me. But, you know, surely, you know, we've known about these things for the longest time. You know, they have been mooted. So I'm not sure what the surprise is about. Or maybe is it a surprise to find out that someone else has them too? Yeah. You know, I'm not sure. And I'm just being cynical.
Or they're just scared of what's going to come out when those devices are actually backtracked.
I think the concern there in that story is the fact that the suggestion that perhaps conversations have been tapped in order to get information to use to blackmail people or to swing tenders in the favor of certain people. But I think
Does that surprise you, really?
No, not really. And for the longest time, I mean, there have been suggestions that all kinds of people's phones are being tapped.
Yes.
And of course, with technology developing the way it has, it's not surprising that people are taking advantage of that.
It's very interesting. When we come back after the break, we're going to look into the very same issue when it comes to spyware. Let's talk about this, Sakina. Please tell us what you think about this story.
The
super spy, yes.
You know, I don't know. I'm hoping they're not tapping my phone, but that would be kind of a useless exercise. But it's a very real concern when you look at, you know, just from a rights perspective already. You know, it's a major concern because I'm sure it will not stop at, you know, people in influential positions tapping each other's phones. But, you know, it's bound to expand to whomever else those who are in possession of these devices may deem to be in collusion with those people. But also, you know, the worry here is that government officials, if this report is to go by, are involved, you know, in the acquisition of...
The other concern is who gave the authority.
Absolutely.
Where did that authority come from? The way I understand it, you know, only the president can give such an authority. So were they acting on their own? How did it come about that these devices were activated?
And it also speaks to this atmosphere, this paranoia, you know, that has gripped the upper levels of our leadership, where, you know, everybody is a bit uncertain and wants to know what the other is talking about, which would lead to this sort of thing.
So they don't trust each other, basically.
Evidently not.
All right, ladies, we'll leave it there and take a quick ad break. And when we return, we're going to continue with the newspaper discussions. This is Media Monitor. Do stay with us.
We must use this month to honor, salute, and remember the immense contributions and sacrifices made by women in the struggle for liberation. We salute all other giants of our struggle, such as Charlotte Maxeke, Lillian Ngoyi, Helen Joseph, Aida Ntwana, Amina Kachalia, Rahima Musa, Florence Mposho, Dorothy Nyembe, Ruth First, Gertrude Shope, Winnie Madikizela Mandela, Adelaide Tambo, Albertina Sisulu, Sophie Dubrain, Ray Alexander Simons, Dulcie September, and many others.
We're back with Media Monitor. If you've just joined us, our media experts today are Ms. Sakina Kamwendo and Ms. Valerie Bourget. Now, let's continue with our discussions and have a look now at the front page of the City Press. It says the NPA goes for the big guns. While the return of the illegal rendition saga. Here on City Press, it says that the newly appointed National Director of Public Prosecutions, Sean Abrams, has now taken a decision to charge Ivan Pillay, Anwar Dramat and Gerrie Nel for the alleged bugging of the NPA Pretoria headquarters back in 2007. Ladies.
Well, I think Abrams is going to be a very interesting head. You know, he comes with a very credible record. And the interesting thing for me about SARS was that SARS was one department that always had such an excellent reputation. It was so when this story broke, I think people were quite shattered, you know, that the one department that everybody thought was better than any other one had this dark side. And of course it's interesting, those who followed the Oscar Pistorius trial, it's interesting that Gerrie Nel is now, you know, one of the people that's involved in this investigation. But I think it's important that it's investigated and that we know what happened there, and you know, SARS can then rebuild itself from that point.
But it also speaks to, you know, the factions within the NPA, whether this is, you know, another step in that battle, because as it turns out, it seems as though Gerrie Nel has always been on the other side of the divide. When Sean Abrams came in, you know, that was one of the questions, whether he would be able to rise above the factionalism within the NPA. You know, so the Gerrie Nel thing for me definitely is one of the questions I'd ask along those lines as well. Whether there's something there or not, time will tell. But the SARS issue, also very interesting that he has decided to charge Ivan Pillay. Ivan Pillay, of course, very interesting, you know, person, as it were. And I think when it comes to SARS, you can tie it into the Independence front page story, their lead story about the spy gadgets. Remember that rogue unit within SARS that was allegedly doing all sorts of illicit things. So again, people have been spied on. And it would be interesting.
And
I don't think we'll ever see.
The spy masters are being challenged.
Exactly. So it's going to be interesting to see who has what.
And again,
I
mean, that also went to the thing of who gave the authorization.
Absolutely.
And you know, was authorization for one thing given, and then the unit just went on its own path. did its own thing.
I don't think that's possible. There had to be a directive somewhere from up there. And my question was really, ladies, I know we've run out of time, but putting a new leader into an organization, how much does that help in terms of rebuilding the image that we see in this case with the NPA? Very quickly, Val.
No, I think it's very important. I mean, unless you're going to change the person at the top, how are you ever going to change anything? So, no, I think it's and I think to find somebody who doesn't come with baggage has been an important thing.
All right.
And that's the difficulty. It's like, someone once said, it's like starting a new brothel with old prostitutes. What really changes that?
Let's leave it there, ladies. Well, it's Women's Month. Women issues are pretty dominant in most papers today. Let's have a look at page 3 of the City Press. It says, media acts like an unelected opposition. Or basically, Muhsin Williams writes about how the media functions in this country as an unelected opposition. He writes boldly about how he feels certain practices by the media in this country leave them as veterans in despair by some of the sheer laziness of the journalists, and he makes an example of how most attacks on the ruling party are from unnamed sources.
But I would have liked to have a more specific example of that lazy journalism, to say, this was the story, this is how you covered it, and this is why I say it is lazy. You neglected to, basically verify A, B, C, D. You did not look into this angle and that angle, because in and of itself, it also just sounds like another attack. And depending on where you're coming from, you could say, well, you then, on the other hand, are perhaps acting as someone who is simply protecting the ruling party.
I find Muhsin's comments very interesting, and I think it's good to open this discussion among the media, and especially in the print media. Obviously, the media has the role to be a watchdog of government. The media has that function, and government must accept that. But at the same time, I hear what he's saying, is that sometimes we sound like we're representing the opposition, we're getting stories from the opposition. And the other thing that I find interesting in that column of his is the fact that he's suggesting that media should state upfront who they support. And this is quite an interesting thought ahead of the local government elections next year.
We won't get jobs.
But is that such a bad idea necessarily?
But I don't think that the media is deliberately being anti-government. I think the government is perhaps super sensitive, whether it's local government or national government. It's a balancing act between pointing out fault, but at the same time, I agree with him, finding those positive stories or representing.
I agree with that.
Representing the good things that are happening.
That
we
I
can't
agree
all
with.
be doom and gloom. We really need to also report on the positives on the country, Sakina, very quickly.
Absolutely, but it speaks to, the lack of developmental journalism in the country. And unless and until we get people, to sort that out, because, nobody wants to look at those stories. Everybody wants a sensational headline
gossip,
that's going to get them the front page.
But of course, what's happening is that certain stories are dominating the news.
And
there
it's
are
usually
certain
scandals.
stories. I mean, we could have predicted some of the stories that were in the paper today.
All right, ladies, let's leave it there on that headline and now have a look at the week in August. It's the front page story there. It says how the SA hostage died in the Mali raid. Well, this story has shocked everyone, especially us here in South Africa. The story talks about the siege where gunmen stormed a Mali hotel and started shooting at the occupants. All we know is that the deceased is a South African man from Pretoria who worked for an aviation company affiliated to Mali.
I think, first of all, I'm from Pretoria, so, our hearts go out to the family of this man. And it's an interesting thing that when there are these kind of attacks that often South Africans are involved. It's an indication of how far and wide South Africans are spread. But it is a concern in that the extremism, the level of violence, is Mali now a country that's going to have to look out for being a base for extremist acts? That's a very big worry. It's the same as the Tunisian attacks. Are the countries north of us in a very vulnerable position?
Or maybe should we start worrying ourselves, Sakina?
I think we should be concerned because we do have citizens, all over the continent, all over the world. We should be concerned because there's nothing that states that we should be spared, some of the atrocities that are perpetrated against others. However, I think we shouldn't be alarmist, about it at this point in terms of, now we need to lock down South Africa, close our borders and the like. I don't think, we're there. But definitely, we should be concerned.
Look, speaking of bad journalism, apparently the name of the deceased was actually released without being verified. What do you say to that, Val?
I didn't realize that, but I mean, obviously this is a big concern, getting verification of names, remembering always that there's a family, involved, and that for them it's a very personal thing.
The rise of citizen journalism, as it is called, and these are some of the unintended negative consequences of that.
All right, that's where we leave it, ladies. We're going to take a quick ad break, but remember that today is Women's Day, and when we return, we're going to unpack the significance of this day to South African women. Don't you go anywhere. This is Media Monitor.
We strongly condemn those who continue to rape and physically abuse women and children. We also condemn the so-called corrective rape targeted to lesbian women, which now threatens to establish itself as a subculture in our society. We encourage all our people to be inspired by the heroism of the 1956 generation to rise up and fight these ills against women. Needless to say, such a struggle must be led by women who understand that their emancipation as women will not be given to them as a gift, but will be a direct consequence of their continuous, conscious struggle for it.
Welcome back to Media Monitor. If you've just joined us this Women's Day, our guests are Sakina Kamwendo, AM Live host on SAFM, and Ms. Valerie Boje, a Pretoria News editor. Now, as we celebrate Women's Day here in South Africa, this is a day that commemorates, among other things, the contribution women made in the struggle for democracy. The official event is already underway in Sasolburg in the Free State, and our reporter SABC is there to give us the sense of what is happening there. Palisa, a very good morning to you. Happy Women's Day. Do paint us a picture. How are the proceedings in the Free State?
Well, thank you very much, Alicia, and a very good morning once again to our viewers at home. We are still at the Harry Gwala Sports Multipurpose Center here in Sasolburg in the Free State Province, whereby the Women's Day National event is held. Today we are expecting dignitaries to arrive any moment from now, but most importantly, all eyes are on the President of the country, Honorable Jacob Zuma, to talk more about the first ever governmental report on the status of women. I must indicate that things are looking great now. Like I indicated earlier on, that we're expecting temperatures to head up to 22 degrees Celsius. It is getting warmer as compared to earlier on. And the people, they're starting to arrive. They're actually flocking in their huge numbers as I talk to you now. Remember that the formal program will be starting in about 30 minutes time from now on. Now, with me here are the young ladies. You know, we just want to talk to them about the significance of today. What do they understand about the National Women's Day? What do they understand about the 1956 women who marched to the Union buildings? Ako go hlalosetsa wena go o tsebang ka letsatsi le ka jeno.
Ke tseba hore ka jeno ke letsatsi la bomme, so be metlamile ba nke maikarabelo for education ya bona, for dintho kaofela ba ga tseba bomme ke bona batho ba powerful ka motlong ka kae. So if bomme ba ka ba strong ka ba le strong, mme ba educated, then South Africa e tla pele haholo. And it's also about 1956 hore ba la re lwanela hore le rona re le bomme re be ne le di-right tsa rona, re be educated and re be powerful. Motho le motho a kgone ho ikemela ka boyena a se ka dependa ho batho ba bang.
Well, the lady here is basically saying that what she knows about the significance of today is that the 1956 women marched to the Union buildings. They fought for us. So she's basically saying that it is now up to the women of South Africa today to take responsibility, especially in terms of education and furthering their studies. Now, let me just get to the other one in here. Wena letsatsi la ka jeno le tseba jwang?
Letsatsi la ka jeno ke la Women's Day. Nka re letsatsi la ka jeko le bolela hore bomme ba tshwanetse ho ikemela, ba sa ikemele fela, ba bale, ba ye dikolong le makatlung a bona ba ikemele, ba hodise bana ba bona, ba sa le ba le hore thuto ke ntho ya pele. Sena thuto ha ona moya.
Well, she's sharing the same sentiment as the other lady about education, that education is the key to everything. So women should stand up, they should stand firm in terms of their education development. You know, you always have a thorn amongst the roses. I have Ndate here. Ndate, the significance of today for you?
The significance of the day today for me is that those late women, 1956 women, they stood up as to say it is not permissible to go around every time sticking with the identity document all over, wherever you are going, while you know yourself. People around you, whom you live around, they know yourself, who you are. So they stood up as to say enough is enough. Let us stand up and do something better that can help us instead of only having the documents moving around with us.
And what do you think men should do in terms of developing or assisting in the development of women?
Our role as men is to stand behind them and to help the women for what they did. I can stand biblically to say the role of a man is the head of the house, and the lady comes behind as the one who stands after the man, as to support the men and to raise the kids. And their role at home is very, very, very critical.
Well, you heard for yourself what he's got to say here regarding women development and the roles of men and women in the society in general. But we will be bringing you more activities as they unfold during the course of the day. Remember that we're expecting about 20,000 women also to march here to relive what happened back in 1956 at the Union buildings. That's basically what we have for now. It's back to you, Alicia.
Very interesting views indeed. That's Palisa Kubise, our reporter on the scene of the venue where the main event commemorating Women's Day is taking place out in the Free State. Now, SABC News will cover most of this event, so do stay tuned. Now, ladies, what are your take and what is your take? Let's start with the comments there from the gentlemen saying that the women's role is to support the men and raise the kids. Are we still thinking like that?
Let me defer to Val. Let me hear her view first and I'll come back.
Oh, I think that was a bit of a surprise on Women's Day. I mean, I'm delighted that the man is there supporting the event, but no, I think it's an important day to reflect on what women's role in the past has been and what women's role in the future should be. I'm looking forward to the release of the report about where we stand, where women stand, politically, economically, And socially, I think there's a real need for men also to understand what women's rights are all about. And yes, if a woman would like to stay at home and raise the kids, that's her right. But equally, if she wants to compete at in any chosen field, that's her right too. I think one of the interesting things for me about the Women's March in Pretoria, I often think about it because obviously the union buildings is part of my daily life,
Yes.
you know, is the fact that it was women standing together. It was women from all different groups standing together. And one of the things that I really like is that it was a quiet march. I think our marches and our protests today tend to be loud and noisy and destructive. So I think there's something that we can gain from that. And tied in with that, I think it's significant that the ANC Women's Conference finished now over this weekend, that we have a new leader of the Women's League, and that there's certainly from initial indications are that the Women's League wants to rebuild itself, wants to play a much bigger role in South African society. So I think that's a very positive story for Women's Day.
Absolutely. Sakina, I was about to ask that what do you make of, the Women's League voting, pushing for a female president?
And before I answer that, let me just go back to, the commemoration of Women's Day. I mean, if you were to ask, right, off the top of your head, who were the leaders of the Women's March in 1956? How many people would be able to tell you that? And it was very clear, very deliberate, a gathering of women to get across a certain message. And they cut across the racial divide, those women. You had Rahima Musa, you had Lillian Ngoyi, you had Sophie Williams de Bruyn, who is still with us.
Still alive.
She's still alive. And you had Helen Joseph.
Yes.
Those were the leaders of this march. And the women who went there had children on their backs, going there to deliver a very important message to the regime at the time that, as women, they mattered, they have a voice, and they will make it heard in spite of, a silent protest. But what they had to bring to the union buildings was very significant. They brought those petitions that were signed and they handed them over to the government of the day. And it wasn't just about, we are women, the pass laws. They spoke about all things, every facet of life that affected women. General sales tax. If you go and you look at those pictures, one of the placards there says GST is too high. Something like that, so they were very aware and very much in touch with the challenges that faced them at the time, which we still grapple with today. Unfortunately. But what was interesting in what the gentleman said there in Sasolburg was that when you look at, the narrative, isn't it interesting that even today, when it comes to African women in particular, and this feminist, I don't want to call it rhetoric, but the narrative rather, that for some reason, African women have not necessarily bought into it in the way in which it is espoused. I have a friend, well-educated, she's an advocate for that matter, and she, when she serves her husband, goes on her knees to do so.
Wow.
She's not oppressed. It's something that she chooses to do. And I think very often when women, Muslim women, choose to wear the hijab, automatically the reaction, the response is that they are oppressed, which is why they dress like that. It's not necessarily the case. And for me, just to bottom line this, as a woman, I don't want men to speak for me, and I don't want women to speak for me either. Is it okay that I speak for myself?
Thank you.
But that was one of the messages I think that Angie Motshekga made at the beginning of the Women's League conference, that it's not for other people to tell us what to do or who to choose as our leader.
This is true, but if you look at the ANC League and the ANC Women's League, can they actually walk the talk? I mean, if they say that they want, a female president, what does that mean? what does it actually mean? Are you actually going to come up, put a name forward and say, this is who we are backing?
And why?
And for me, it doesn't matter that that person gets wholly defeated, you know, in the election. But it makes the point that we are here, get used to the fact that we will be contesting these lofty positions alongside you.
I feel so blessed to have both of you in studio on such a wonderful day. Well, we're going to take a very quick ad break, and after that, we look at the mining woes that are looming and could cripple the economy. Do stay tuned for this and more.
Women used their common rejection of the repressive past laws as a rallying point for the struggle of women for a free South Africa. That march became a milestone and one of the biggest demonstrations in the struggle against the apartheid regime in general and the past laws in particular, having mobilized 20,000 women throughout the country.
Welcome back to Media Monitor. We're live here on Africa's News Leader, and now we continue with the review of the week's top news. Almost 60 police have been killed this year, prompting a night vigil which was held outside the Johannesburg Central Police Station for zero tolerance against these killings. Police killings have been condemned by policing forums and President Jacob Zuma. Let's take a look at this clip.
Let us stop the cop killings, and I agree. One police killing, one life sentence.
You police officers cannot take cover. You must take charge. The reason you are in uniform is because you are empowered to do that. The reason you are armed is because you are empowered to do that. We know, we trust you. You are not going to shoot someone who's innocent.
Urging all the criminals to stop killing our police officers because they are human beings. They have families.
Ladies, I really want to hear your views, and bearing in mind that there was burglaries at Justice Michael Masuta's residence. I mean, what's going on here? Are criminals that brazen? Sakina, let's start with you.
Yes, they are. And, firstly, let me just condemn in the strongest possible terms, the killing of police officers. There can never be any justification for it. Let's just be clear on that. However, there is a serious problem in our society. When people attack the police, it's not just killing a policeman or assaulting a policeman. It's an attack against the system. That is what we are essentially doing. However, the police themselves have not for the most part, adorn themselves in, the best possible light. And if you go back 2 years ago, was it, when that report was released that stated that 83% of South Africans do not trust the police.
A damning report.
That is a damning report. That's a damning statistic. So it speaks to, the trust deficit that exists between the police and the public at large. So something needs to be done. The situation is also then aggravated by these protest marches and, situations that bring the police directly in conflict with the public again. And that does not help the situation either. So it is a really worrying situation, but it's one that we will have to confront head on. It can never be condoned.
I think it also goes to, what kind of a police force do we want? I think we saw with the Farnham Commission findings on Marikana that, the police, the whole attitude was wrong. Perhaps morale is low. Their issues around their training. And I feel desperately sorry for police who put into a situation, they're chasing criminals. Those criminals feel nothing, and then there's a whole question about illegal guns, criminals who are armed. What chance does a policeman have against armed criminals who have no regard for them?
And that's very scary. The situation, the incident in Rosettenville, where this guy brazenly in a shopping mall for all to see, captured on CCTV TV, shoots a policeman, takes his weapon and walks out.
And people just
walks
scatter
out,
away.
not run, he walks out. I mean, if that doesn't scare the living daylights out of you, I don't know what will.
All
because
right,
who is going to maintain law and order in the society?
Let's leave that question to the public out there and try now and move on to another issue now. In an effort to cope with slumping commodity prices, the mining sector is considering laying off thousands of employees, fearing the impact that the looming retrenchments will have on the already compressed economy. Stakeholders in the mining sector met to find ways to avoid the move. Also, it was discussed in Parliament. It was brought as a motion by the ruling party to discuss the challenges that are still inherent within the mining industry. Sakina, let's start with you.
Firstly, I think government, approaches, at least in their dealings with the mining sector, they always have kid gloves in this matter. If you look at the mining charter, for example, it was very clear. The deadlines were very clear in terms of by which cut-off date certain conditions needed to be met, and that was last year. And when those conditions are not met, should we be going back and be nice about it, especially given the socioeconomic conditions that prevail around mining activities, mining institutions? No, I think government should be a lot harsher.
Just like in the taxi industry.
Exactly. Otherwise, we're not going to get to the bottom of this. Yes, we are dealing with slumping commodity prices. Yes, there are a myriad of issues right now that are bedeviling the mining industry. However, what do we want the mine workers to do or say? Do we want them to say, okay, because things are rough, it's okay, you can pay us a pittance? And why wasn't this set right when things were good, when the commodity prices were booming?
The thing about pay, it's always the balancing act between the salary demands are, for more than double some of the existing salaries. So they need to look at the whole structure of salaries in the mines. At the same time, what has been done in mining communities. I mean, I think, again, the Farnham Commission report was interesting in that it highlighted the kind of conditions that still exist in the Platinum Belt. So many of those miners who were killed actually came from the Eastern Cape. Some came from Lesotho. They weren't local people that could go home at the end of a shift to their families.
All right, ladies. Unfortunately, we have to leave our discussion there. No, we've run out of time. They can't even give us an extra minute on Women's Day. But let's quickly have a look at what you've written on Twitter on our topics that we've been discussing throughout this hour. Bangi Payane says it is not properly commemorated. There should be impact by the end of it in relation to Women's Day. The Maisha Bopape says we could empower them through consumer cooperatives. That's a very intelligent point there from Maisha. And Mazwaivo Kleka, a loyal viewer indeed. You kill a policeman, you kill a nation. This is a serious crisis, as you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, it's exactly that. It's exactly that. But also, I wanted to ask Val, isn't the timing of the negotiations, talk about salary and salary demands in the mining industry curious? Why are we talking about the high demands in a time of depressed economics?
I'm not suggesting that what's being asked for is unreasonable. I'm not suggesting that at all. But it's very difficult because the mines can then come and say, right, we're just going to have fewer jobs.
Ladies, I know you really worry about employment in this country, but unfortunately we've run out of time. I want to know very quickly, what do you think will be making news headlines? One story, very quickly, Chriselle.
This week, probably the mining stories will continue until such time that they reach an agreement. That would be one of them.
All right, we're going to keep watching.
No, certainly that's one. Let me think what else. Now you caught me off guard.
All right, so ladies, thank you so much for joining us today, and a happy Women's Day. Do go out there and make a difference, and thank you for being part of the media fraternity. We're learning from you guys. And to our viewers, thank you so much for joining us today. Remember that your contributions and suggestions are highly valued. You can email us for any suggestions and compliments on mediamonitor@sabc.co.za. We're also available on Facebook. Go to www.facebook.com/mediamonitor and tick like on our page. Not forgetting Twitter @SAMediaMonitor. To get our repeat broadcast, do tune in at 2 a.m. But if you can't wait or you'll be fast asleep, then www.youtube.com/SABC News. And for all our online updates, our website www.sabc.co.za/news to get more info on the stories on our info boards as well. From the QTIV team and my guest today, thank you so much for joining us. You have yourself a blessed Sunday and happy Women's Day to all the ladies. And once again, I'm Alisha Jali. This is SABC News.